The morning light painted elongated figures across Crestwood Academy's grounds as Willow Blackwood tugged at her roomy hoodie, a nervous habit she'd picked up. Her petite build seemed lost inside the garment, and her sable hair cascaded around her sharp features, forming a defense against interaction. Students milled about, their chatter a constant drone she'd mastered ignoring since transferring from Montana last fall. Willow tightened her grip on her time-worn rucksack as she headed for the main building, her gaze fixed downwards. She'd become adept at blending in, or so she believed, navigating the corridors like a shadow. Her grandfather's words echoed in her memory, spoken with the lilting cadence of his Gaelic heritage, like the willow lass, yield so you don't snap. The advice felt empty now, especially when she noticed the well-known clique sporting varsity jackets near the athletic center's entrance. Well, well, look who's decided to honor us with her presence, boomed the voice that had plagued her thoughts for weeks. Chad Sterling stood with his usual followers, his flawlessly styled brown hair gleaming under the artificial lights. Standing at an imposing 6'2", with a physique sculpted by years of wrestling, he demanded attention. His piercing grey eyes held a sinister spark Willow had come to recognize as the prelude to another day of misery. Behind him stood his loyal companions, Kevin Baker, whose sandy hair and pockmarked face might have seemed welcoming on someone else, but whose sneer was as familiar as his own reflection, and Damon Jones, olive-skinned and muscular, who appeared to derive genuine pleasure from the daily ritual of belittlement. They were the unassailable elite of Crestwood, their status reinforced by championship accolades and familial connections that ran deep within the town's social hierarchy. "Hey, Stringbean!" Chad yelled, using the moniker that had somehow taken root after someone noticed how her ribs faintly showed through her slender frame. "Did you bother eating today, or are you still living on air and despair?" The small gathering that had formed snickered, and Willow felt the telltale flush of humiliation creep across her face. She increased her pace, hoping to slip by them, but Kevin sidestepped, blocking her path with practiced ease. "Where are you rushing off to?" Kevin's voice dripped with a fake friendliness that made Willow's stomach churn. "We're just trying to be decent. Maybe offer you a snack or something." "I'm all right," Willow mumbled, her voice barely audible over the surrounding noise. She tried to move around him, but Damon shifted to block her other side, trapping her in a semicircle of mocking smiles. "All right," Chad repeated, his voice escalating in false astonishment. "Look at you. You're practically see-through. I bet I could lift you with one hand." He reached out as if to prove it, and Willow recoiled, bumping into the lockers behind her. The metallic clang reverberated through the corridor, and more students started to gather, sensing the familiar spectacle. Mr. Thompson strolled by, his dress shoes clicking against the floor tiles, but his eyes remained focused straight ahead. Like most of the faculty, he had perfected the art of selective ignorance when it came to the social structures that governed student behavior. "Please," Willow managed, her voice stronger now but still shaky. "I just want to get to class." "Just want to get to class," Damon mimicked in a shrill tone, eliciting another wave of laughter from the burgeoning audience. "What class?" Advanced vanishing. Willow's hands balled into fists at her sides, but she forced herself to remain composed. Her grandfather's teachings had instilled in her that true strength came from self-control, from knowing when to engage and when to endure. But more than that, she understood the precarious nature of her situation. One wrong move, one moment of lost composure, and everything would unravel in ways she couldn't foresee. The torment continued as it always did, with calculated malice designed to shame without crossing boundaries that would warrant administrative intervention. They knocked her textbooks from her grasp, trod on her papers, and maintained a constant barrage of commentary about her looks, her background, and her perceived inadequacies. Through it all, Willow remained silent, gathering her scattered possessions and navigating her day like a vessel weathering a storm. By midday, she had retreated to her usual haven, the secluded corner of the library where the encyclopedias formed a natural barrier between her and the rest of the student body. The librarian, Ms. Davis, was one of the few adults who seemed to acknowledge her existence, occasionally offering a kind word or a book suggestion. Today, however, even her gentle presence couldn't lighten the burden that had settled in her heart. She took out her phone and scrolled through messages from her closest friend back in Bozeman, each notification a reminder of the life she had left behind. The photos depicted familiar faces laughing at private jokes she no longer shared, living experiences she could only observe from afar. The isolation felt absolute, a perfect convergence of geographic displacement and social banishment. "Excuse me," a voice broke through her reverie. Willow looked up to see a girl with kind hazel eyes and wavy chestnut hair tied back in a casual knot. She recognized her from honors physics, but had never interacted with her directly. "I'm Hazel Bennett. Do you mind if I sit?" Willow nodded, taken aback by the request. Hazel settled into the chair across from her, taking out her own lunch with easy confidence. "I saw what happened this morning," Hazel said softly, unwrapping a sandwich. "Those guys are such creeps. I'm sorry you have to put up with that." The kindness in her voice nearly shattered Willow's carefully constructed defenses. "It's nothing I can't handle," she replied, though the words rang hollow even as she uttered them. "Nobody should have to handle that," Hazel said firmly. "Have you considered telling someone? A counselor, or maybe the principal?" Willow shook her head. "It wouldn't make a difference. They're careful not to do anything that would actually get them in trouble. And their families," she trailed off, not wanting to articulate the hopelessness she felt. Hazel studied her for a moment, then smiled. "Well, for what it's worth, I think you're tougher than you realize. Sometimes the quietest people are the ones who surprise everyone." As the days turned into weeks, Hazel's friendship became a lifeline. They sat together in physics class, studied in the library, and gradually, Willow began to feel less invisible. Hazel had a knack for drawing her out, asking about her life in Montana, her interests, her aspirations. For the first time since arriving at Crestwood, Willow felt like she might actually belong somewhere. But Chad and his friends noticed the change too. They began to target Hazel as well, making lewd comments about her appearance and questioning why she would associate with the string bean. Hazel handled it with more poise than Willow thought possible, deflecting their insults with quick wit and refusing to be intimidated. "You know," Chad said one afternoon as they passed Hazel and Willow in the hallway, "I didn't think anyone could find someone desperate enough to hang out with Bones over there. I guess I was wrong." "Maybe they're a match made in heaven," Kevin added with a cruel smirk. "The Scarecrow and the what?" Hazel interrupted, stepping forward with her chin raised. "Go ahead, finish that thought. I double dare you." The challenge hung in the air like a charged particle. Chad's eyes narrowed, clearly not accustomed to being challenged so directly. "Careful, Bennett. You don't want to make this worse for yourself." "Or what?" Hazel's voice remained steady, but Willow could see the tension in her shoulders. "You'll what exactly? Push me around like you do her? Real brave, picking on people who won't fight back?" The crowd that had gathered sensed the shift in power. This wasn't the typical one-sided bullying they had grown used to witnessing. This was something different, something that crackled with potential repercussions. Chad stepped closer, his size advantage obvious. "You have no clue what you're getting yourself into." "Actually," Hazel said, not backing down, "I think I have a pretty good idea. You're a bully who needs an audience to feel important. Without your little fan club, you're just another insecure kid who peaked in high school." The words struck a nerve. Chad's face flushed crimson, and for a moment it seemed like he might actually do something that would cross the line into territory the school couldn't ignore. But then Damon placed a hand on his shoulder, and the moment passed. "We'll see about that," Chad said finally, his voice low and menacing. "Both of you." That evening, Willow found herself pacing her room, replaying the confrontation over and over. Hazel's bravery had been inspiring, but it had also escalated things in a way that felt dangerous. Her phone buzzed with a text from Hazel. "Don't sweat today. They're all bark." But Willow knew better. She had seen the look in Chad's eyes, the way his jaw had tightened when Hazel called him a bully. This wasn't over. If anything, it was just beginning. She walked to her closet and pushed aside the hanging clothes, revealing a collection of medals and trophies hidden behind them. Junior National Karate Championships, black belt certifications, tournament wins spanning 6 years of dedicated training. Her grandfather's legacy lived in those achievements, in the discipline and strength that had been forged through countless hours of practice. Her phone rang, and her grandfather's voice filled the room with its familiar warmth. "Little Blossom, you sound troubled. Tell me what's weighing on your heart." Willow found herself recounting the entire story, from the daily humiliations to Hazel's friendship to the growing animosity. Her grandfather listened without interruption, the way he always did, letting the words flow until they were exhausted. "And you have told no one of your training," her grandfather said finally. It wasn't a question. "You taught me that true strength is shown through restraint," Willow replied, "that the greatest victory is the one that requires no conflict." "Yes, child, but I also taught you that there comes a time when restraint becomes inaction, when silence enables cruelty. The willow bends, but it does not break, and when the storm passes, it stands tall again." The conversation continued late into the night, exploring the delicate balance between peace and justice, between turning the other cheek and standing up for what was right. By the time they hung up, Willow felt something shifting inside her, a quiet determination that had been building for weeks finally solidifying into purpose. The next morning brought an unexpected warmth to the school grounds. Students had shed their heavier outerwear, and the atmosphere felt different, more charged somehow. Willow noticed the change immediately, the way conversations seemed more animated, glances more meaningful. Word had spread about yesterday's confrontation, and the entire school seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for the next act to unfold. She found Hazel at their usual spot in the library, but something was off. Her friend's usual bright smile was forced, and there were dark circles under her eyes that suggested a restless night. "Everything all right?" Willow asked, settling into the chair beside her. Hazel hesitated, then took out her phone. The screen displayed a series of messages, each one more malicious than the last. Anonymous accounts had flooded her social media with cruel comments, doctored images, and threats. The harassment had followed her home, invaded her personal space, and transformed her digital life into a war zone. "They're really coming after you," Willow said softly, scrolling through the messages. Her hands trembled slightly as she read words designed to wound, to isolate, to destroy. "I can handle it," Hazel said, but her voice lacked confidence. I didn't expect them to be so ruthless, or so organized." As if summoned by their conversation, Chad and his friends appeared at the library entrance. They couldn't enter without risking Miss Davis's intervention, but they didn't need to. Their presence was message enough, a reminder that there was no real refuge, no place where their influence couldn't reach. Chad caught Willow's eye and smiled, the expression cold and calculating. He mouthed something that might have been soon or pow. The exact word didn't matter. The meaning was clear enough. The rest of the day passed in a blur of apprehension. Teachers noticed the tension, The way students seemed to huddle in groups, whispering with unusual intensity. But like always, they remained deliberately blind to the undercurrents that shaped their students' lives. It was during the lunch break that everything finally reached its breaking point. Willow and Hazel had found a quiet spot behind the gymnasium, away from the main throng. They were sharing a bag of pretzels and discussing weekend plans when the laughter began. "Look what we have here," Chad's voice sliced through the afternoon air like a knife. The odd couple, hiding away like always. They approached with exaggerated swagger, their movements synchronized like a pack of predators. Behind them trailed a larger group of students, drawn by the promise of drama. Someone had already started recording with their smartphone. "We thought you should know," Kevin said, his voice dripping with false concern. "That we've been giving your little speech yesterday some thought, Bennett. Really inspiring stuff, especially the part about us being bullies," Damon added, his tone deceptively casual. "That really stung. Made us want to prove you wrong." Hazel stood up, her chin raised defiantly. "I'm not intimidated by you." "Maybe you should be," Chad said, stepping closer. "See, the thing is, we can't let that kind of disrespect slide. Bad for our image, you know." The circle of students tightened, and Willow felt the familiar sensation of being cornered, of having no way out. But this time was different. This time Hazel was beside her, and the protective instinct that had been building for weeks suddenly surged into something stronger. "Just leave us alone," Willow said, her voice steadier than she felt. "We haven't done anything to you." Chad laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "Haven't done anything? Your little friend here called me a bully in front of half the school. That's not something I can let slide." "She was right," Willow said, the words surprising everyone, including herself. "You are a bully. All of you." The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the distant sound of traffic and the rustle of leaves in the trees. Chad's face went through several shades of red before settling on a dangerous purple. "What did you just say?" "I said you're a bully," Willow repeated, louder this time. "You pick on people who won't fight back because you're too scared to face anyone who might actually challenge you. You're pathetic." The words hung in the air like a declaration of war. Around them, the crowd pressed closer, phones raised, capturing every moment of what was clearly going to be a pivotal confrontation. Chad's composure finally shattered. "You want to see pathetic? I'll show you pathetic." He lunged forward, his hands reaching for Willow's hoodie. The fabric tore with a loud ripping sound, exposing her slender shoulders and the simple camisole underneath. The crowd gasped and someone giggled, but Willow barely registered them. Something fundamental shifted inside her, like a dam collapsing or a cage door swinging open. The months of humiliation, the daily erosion of her self-worth, the sight of Hazel's tears, it all coalesced into a single moment of perfect clarity. Chad was still smirking, holding the torn fabric like a prize, when Willow's fist connected with his nose. The sound was sharp and wet, like a twig snapping, and blood immediately began to flow. His head snapped back and he stumbled, shock replacing the cruel amusement in his eyes. "Holy crap," someone whispered, and the crowd erupted in pandemonium. But Willow wasn't finished. Years of training had taught her to see weaknesses, to recognize when an opponent was vulnerable. As Chad tried to regain his footing, she swept his legs, sending him crashing to the ground. The movement was fluid, efficient, beautiful in its precision. Kevin rushed forward, probably intending to help his friend, but Willow spun to face him. Her stance was different now, balanced, centered, radiating a quiet confidence that made him hesitate. "Don't," she said simply, and something in her voice made him stop. Damon took a step back, his bravado vanishing as he processed what he had just witnessed. This wasn't the timid, silent girl they had been tormenting. This was someone else entirely, someone who moved with lethal grace and spoke with unwavering authority. Chad rolled over, blood gushing from his nose, and looked up at Willow with a mixture of pain and disbelief. You broke my nose." "I could have broken a lot more," Willow replied calmly, "but I chose not to. Remember that." She knelt beside him, her voice dropping to a whisper that only he could hear. "You want to know what pathetic looks like? It's lying on the ground bleeding because you picked on someone you thought was weak. It's spending so much time making other people feel small that you forgot how to be anything else." She stood up, brushing dirt from her jeans, and looked around at the circle of stunned faces. "Anyone else want to try something?" The silence stretched on, broken only by Chad's ragged breathing and the distant sound of footsteps as teachers finally began to respond to the commotion. But Willow wasn't done. She turned to face the crowd, her voice carrying clearly across the courtyard. "I'm done being afraid," she said. "I'm done watching good people get hurt because the rest of us are too scared to do anything about it. This ends now." Hazel stepped forward, her face glowing with admiration and something that might have been affection. "Willow—" "I should have done this weeks ago," Willow said, taking Hazel's hand. "I should have stood up for myself, for you, for everyone they've hurt. I'm sorry it took me so long." As the teachers arrived and began to restore order, as statements were taken and consequences discussed, the entire climate of Crestwood Academy shifted. The untouchable elite had been touched and found wanting. The timid girl had revealed herself to be a warrior, and the warrior had shown mercy. In the weeks that followed, the changes were subtle but profound. Chad returned to school with a cast on his nose and a considerably diminished entourage. His friends, having witnessed the swift and decisive nature of his defeat, began to distance themselves from the casual cruelty that had once defined their group. Hazel and Willow's friendship blossomed into something deeper, their shared ordeal, forging a bond that transcended the usual boundaries of high school relationships. They were seen together constantly, two people who had found in each other the strength to be authentically themselves. But perhaps the most significant change was in Willow herself. The girl who had once tried to disappear now walked with quiet assurance, her head held high, her voice clear and strong. She had learned that true strength wasn't about having the power to inflict harm. It was about having the courage to defend what mattered, even when that meant revealing parts of yourself you had kept hidden. The story of that day spread through the school like wildfire, evolving and changing with each retelling, but the core message remained constant. Sometimes the quietest people are the ones who surprise everyone. Sometimes the person you think is weakest is actually the strongest of all. And sometimes, when you stand up for what's right, you discover that you were never really alone in the first place.